Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cope Life Nation show with me, your host, Dr. Charleston Gaines. I'm so excited to be here. I have a very special episode today with a good friend of mine, Jock Brockus, and we're going to talk about spirituality. And the reason I want to talk about spirituality is because in the modern era, it almost seems like there's no room for it. There's no time. We talk about science, we talk about technology, and I think that there are some people clinging to spirituality, but they don't really know what they're clinging to or they don't know why. And there's a lot of distractions and there's a lot of different aspects of our world where it seems spirituality doesn't fit. And I think a lot of people look at spirituality almost as if it's synonymous with religion. So when they think of spirituality, they think of finding time to read the religious text or finding time to pray and certain practices or traditions within their religion. However, I don't believe that you need to be religious to be spiritual, and I don't believe that there are certain traditions that are required because I believe that your spirit is something that is personal and unique to you, and you have to find your own way to elevate or enhance yourself spiritually. And so when we're looking at all of the technology, all of the distractions, and all of the reasons why we can turn away from spirituality, all the reasons why we can say it doesn't matter, for that, I have my very special guest, Jock, to talk about it and to really drive home the point that spirituality, I think, is more necessary than ever. So without further ado, let me bring on my good friend Jock and let's get this party rolling. How's it going?
Good evening. Good evening. Yes, thank you for having me on, my friend. It's good to see you again.
I'm glad you're here. You know, I'm one of those people that's caught up in all of the technology, right? I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not talking about distractions as if
Yeah.
everyone is distracted, but I'm better than them. Like that's not the case at all. What's really going on is I think for me and for other people, as we dive more into different facets of our lives,
Mm.
like me figuring out how to use Chat GPT 4, and
Yeah.
there's different layers and levels of this. So as I figure out how to use these things to automate so much of our
Yeah.
lives, I kind of look back and think, okay, now that I can automate these processes and I can use machines, which have me so caught up in technology that I'm not even talking to people
Yeah.
as much as I would like. Where does spirituality fit? And this it's a broad question,
Yeah.
but you give your answer and we're gonna go from there. So just let's start there, Jock. And
Okay.
with modern technology, where does spirituality fit?
Well, here's the thing. I love what you said at the beginning. So let me echo what you said, Charleston, is that spirituality and religion are completely different, but there is a seed of spirituality in all religions, right? We have a seed, and the spirituality exists in all religions. So let's get back to the technology. Well, here's the reality is that we wouldn't have this technology unless we had spirituality. And what I mean by that is that technology has to come from somewhere. And if you actually analyze it and blend and take it down and you go right back to the seed of where it came from, it had to come from a thought. It had to come from inspiration in the mind. That is neither religious, neither or scientific. The mind is the psychological building blocks of our reality. The mind is an aspect of our spiritual self. The mind is our spirit, or it's part of it. It's and I argue with a lot of with scientists and about whether the brain is the mind or whether the mind is the brain or whether the brain is an expression of the mind, and that's normally fascinating. But the reality is, I won't go into that one because that's another podcast. But the reality is that we wouldn't have the technology that we have now without it becoming, coming from a spiritual concept or coming from spirituality. So no one can really deny it, that without a spiritual foundation, we don't exist. Without a spiritual foundation, we can't move forward. Whether you label it in religion, whether you call it something else, or even if you don't even recognize it in your life, you only exist because it exists and animates in you. And you were exactly right, Charleston. It's the inside, it's your spirit, the spirit inside of you that's been the animating force of everything that exists comes from a divine power. And that's the essence of spirituality. And I think you've got to understand, and people have got to understand out there, that what is spiritual to one person is not to another. And so we all have our own truth for spirituality. But for me, spirituality means clarity.
See, you mentioned clarity, and really, you said a few things that I want to hit on, right, all at once. But you talked about clarity, and you talked
Yeah.
about the difference between the mind and the brain,
Yeah.
and you also said what spirituality means to me. And of course, it's what it means to you because it is
Mm,
personal
it's personal.
and genuine to each of us. But what I think about is when I think of spirit, and this may be
Mm,
my own way of just kind of putting it, but there's certain information maybe we all get access to, right?
mm,
For example, if we're all watching the same documentary, we all get the same information that's flashed on the screen or whatever. And
mm,
so that information hits our senses and it gets stored in our brain as memories. And we're all watching the same show. And the way our brains work is the same. We all have the same parts of the brain, right? We all have
mm.
an amygdala. We all have a frontal
Yeah,
cortex. We all
absolutely.
have all those things. So then,
Mm,
what is the deciding factor on why I may have a certain emotional reaction that's different from yours? And I think so. To me, on the most fundamental level, that's kind of a difference in spirit because it's all the information is the same. But I look at that and I'm triggered by something in my past, and you look at that and you think
mm,
that's a very interesting topic. I want to research it more.
mm.
And
I think
so,
I
go
think
ahead.
it comes down to awareness, Charleston. It comes down to your
Okay.
level of awareness, because we can stand in front of the same tree, just the same as you're saying. We're looking at the same, the same screen. We've got all the technology, we've got everything there. We're looking at the same screen, but you're invoking some different energies within you, and I'm invoking different energies. My awareness is different to your awareness. Neither one of our awarenesses can be the same. Psychologically, we can't have that same individual awareness pattern, because then where would be our identity, and where would that be? We wouldn't have that identity. We wouldn't have that our own profile. And our experiences and our memories are the sum total of who we are. Everybody's experience and everybody's memory is individual to them. So even though we look at the same thing, we may experience it differently. And there's a great book out there called "The Awakened Brain." It's fascinating. Anybody that I would recommend it now. Let me see if I got it here. It's maybe through my chair. But I'll be interviewing her, Dr. Lisa. I can't remember her second name, but she talks about how they did a test, and they did some random tests, and they were able to certain people that were more awakened. Now, I'm not necessarily going to talk about the brain here because I'm not a neuroscientist, but and I have arguments against between the mind and the brain, as you know. But I'm going to talk about if we have an awakened mind, or this awakened brain that she's saying, more people that have more of these experiences that are maybe spiritual type experiences are able to perceive things differently. Their awareness is different, and they can experience and see more than what another individual will see. And that all boils down to a sum total of our experiences, our memories, and the level of awareness that we have opened up to ourselves. So I think it's very important to realize that even though everything that we perceive outside of us may tangibly look the same, internally it is going to be completely different, because we are all vibrating at a different vibration, and we all have a unique vibration. We would, if we were all the same, what would we learn? How would we grow?
I love that. I love thinking and talking about it in the sense of our uniqueness.
Mm,
But I think that for a lot of people, as we move through this modern world with all of these technologies and distractions,
mm,
I think that we often look at individual things differently. And what I mean by that is, and this goes back to what you were saying about awareness,
mm.
we can both look at the same news report about a specific incident and have different perspectives on it, but that's one event. And I think that we often don't spend enough time zooming out, basically. Instead of looking at this one event, let me look at myself and my world and my perspective as a whole. And so, my question for you
Mm.
is, as I zoom out and as I take a macro level view of my world, my perception, where does spirituality fit into that?
Spirituality is internal. It is not external. And I think in some of the greatest spiritual scriptures, or in any of the great, a lot of the spiritual writings that are out there, whether it be from any religion or whether it be from any indigenous belief system or just any other spiritual system, you can see there's an underlying golden thread. There's an underlying thread that there is a commonality that connects us all. And the reality is, that everything is within. Jesus said it in the Bible, that all answers are within. And so your spirituality is within. Your spirituality is part of you. It is you. It is an expression of the divine. And so, when we're caught up in the material world so much in technology, we often fail, as you say, to have this observer effect rather than a participant. This is the important thing, is that when you're saying we take that macro level view, we come out of it and we want to see that, then how I would interpret that is I want to see that as an observer rather than a participant, because when I'm a participant, I'm focused only on that one particular thing and I can only see that one particular thing. If I come out of it, I have an overarching theme, and I can become the observer. I can take so much more in, and I can discern internally what it is that I need or what my soul needs to grow. And so I always think about, I always teach people to don't be the participant, be the observer.
I like that. I like that. That goes back to what you were saying about awareness.
Yeah.
And and I think we've all said and have heard other people say, why did I do that? What was I thinking? And I think that ties directly to what you just said.
Yeah.
And sometimes instead of doing the doing, or instead of doing the thinking, we can step back and do the observing.
Yeah.
And when I think about doing the observing instead of being a participant, it reminds me a lot of what I've heard people say, or people have said things like certain things, maybe walking in nature,
Yeah.
or feeling the sense of awe, whether in the mountains
Yeah.
or near the ocean. They call it a spiritual experience. And so, how would you? So if I were to say that, if I were to say I was alone and grounded at the beach and listening to the waves, and it was very spiritual to me, how do you explain that? Like, how is that spiritual besides me just saying the
Mm.
words?
Well, that's interesting because you are covering something here where people believe in a concept or perceive a concept, and often that concept is words that are strung together. It's words that are said glibly. Oh, let's go walking in nature because when I'm in nature, that's when I feel more spiritual. Here's the reality, ladies and gentlemen. You don't have to go seeking the spiritual to be able to be spiritual, because all you need to do is to go inside of you and to realize that you are spiritual. I can have a spiritual moment in the shower. I can have a spiritual moment when I eat my food. I'm having, if I'm aware now and I'm the perception, if you like, that this moment that we are in, and sharing this wisdom, sharing this time between you and I and the other readers out there, isn't that a spiritual moment? Isn't that, can't we view that as a spiritual moment? See, so many people tend to label spirituality as an act of something that takes you away from who you are. I must get to the present moment, right? I have to get to the present moment. I have to go to the beach. I have to go to and I'm not saying it's wrong. I say that's another way of expressing, and that's another way of getting you into training your mind, going back to the mind, training the mind in a spiritual concept, which is when we teach meditation. When I first learned meditation, you go through visualization, you're training your mind, you're not actually meditating. You learn to meditate when you touch the silence within and you discern that. So I would say to people that you don't have to go looking out there. You don't have to go looking for that experience to be spiritual, or to say that you've had that spiritual time or that spiritual experience, because you can have that spiritual experience at any given time, at any given moment, and all it takes is you to become aware and to go within.
I love that answer because I think that answer really aligns with so many ancient texts and
Mm,
writings. The spirituality, when you talk about meditation is something that's been done for thousands of years.
yeah.
And to this day, it's more effective for a lot of mental health disorders
Mm,
than the actual medication. And
yes.
there's new versions, there's new layers of
Mm,
antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications.
mm.
And there's a new twist. And there's a new twist because the ad said so, right?
Yes. And that's why
Yeah,
you have to buy it, because they found a new avenue to go down.
exactly.
Yeah.
And what it does is, I mean, we know what these medications do. They essentially take you away from yourself. It shuts down
Yeah.
certain parts of you,
Yeah.
whereas the meditation is the opposite. And so when you speak on meditation and spirituality, the word that comes to mind for me is peace, really.
Yeah.
And I say that because for a lot of people, meditation is hard.
Yes.
And and I've tried to tell people meditation in itself is not difficult. Your difficulty is calming the mind,
Yes.
which is different than the actual effort of meditation. So I was wondering if you could speak for a
Mm,
little bit on kind of the integration or the
yeah.
interconnectedness of meditation and spirituality.
Okay, so I'm probably going to shock everybody here. Okay, because and
I'm okay with that. Let's do it.
because you know what I'm like. This is why. So all right, so let's talk about meditation and bringing that integration into your life. And I have a saying that I teach students, because I teach meditation a lot. And I tell them that meditation is simple in its difficulty and difficult in its simplicity. And here's the reality: meditation, you have to have an appreciation for meditation, that there's a dark side to meditation, there's a light side to meditation, right? And nobody teaches that. Well, hardly anybody teaches that. And I know that in the past few years, when there's been some research done, especially with the mind brain correlation, if we go into the state of mindfulness, there is a darker side to mindfulness. This is something I've been researching for a long time. And I would say I wouldn't, anybody who has a potential mental imbalance, or at worst psychosis, I would be caution them to take them through meditation, or anybody who's had a trauma that is not ready to deal with meditation. Because here's the thing about meditation, ladies and gentlemen, is that meditation is beautiful. Meditation has so many benefits. To bring it into your life, to integrate it into your life with an expectation of harmonious resonance in your life, to bring peace and calm. And if you're looking at mindfulness, the MBSR, or mindfulness based stress reduction, mindfulness based cognitive therapy, we've got many different models of it, and each one of these models tackles your mind or your experiences in a different way. Meditation in its very simple form allows you to be quiet, to go within, to touch the void of a spiritual divine power, and to recognize, to have a realization, if you like, to realize who you are, that you are a spirit having a human experience and not a human having a spirit experience. Now, here's the thing is that when you open up that gateway, you need to be aware that in the meditative state, things that have hurt you in the past, experiences that you've had that have caused anxiety, have caused problems, will come to the surface to allow you, as the observer, not the participant, we go back to that observer participant idea, to see it, to accept it, to become aware of it, to accept it, and then to transmute it. And so you must realize that even going into a meditative practice, which I would say everybody go and do it because it has so many benefits. You also have to be aware and be prepared to face those inner demons because you want to let them go. You want to slay those dragons that come up to burn you when you're least expecting it. And so you have to go into a meditation practice with a little bit of knowledge of what to expect and how it may interact. And then when you become aware of it and you come to accept it, then you're ready to integrate it into your life.
I like that. I mean, the idea that you need a sense of who you are,
Mm,
and you need a sense of understanding yourself, your personhood, your spirit, because you can cause harm through meditation. And
mm.
I know that a lot of people maybe have never heard that before, but I've actually heard that before through
Yeah.
a lot of martial arts training that I've had, where
Yeah.
there's certain levels of meditation where my seniors in the martial arts were saying, we're not going to show you that yet. You're not ready for that yet.
Absolutely.
And
Mm.
so there's so much more to meditation than just
Yeah.
close your eyes, breathing, and be spiritual. Because I think the more that we simplify it and dumb it down, the more we're giving it the AI treatment. Well, just let the spirit do the spirit thing. And it's like, no, there's a whole person involved.
It's interesting. Yeah, let's bring the AI part back to this because you kind of say, before we're going to want to talk about this is AI going to change your spirituality? Well, absolutely not. Even the technology we have, it cannot make you more spiritual. We're sentient beings. AI cannot be sentient. It's not going to have the spiritual energy form. But what can you do with it? Well, with anything to do with AI and technology in there, if you teach it and you give it information so that it learns from your information you're given, that model, it will help you with the research and will output things for you to be able to take on board and perhaps challenge, perhaps learn from, perhaps investigate. It is not going to make you more spiritual. It is not going to help you your meditation. AI I hate to use the word, it's a horror. I don't like to use the word like something becoming a slave to you, right? Because reality is that we are all slaves to technology in a way. And I can't even think of a better, Charleston, you might have a better word for this. We are really slaves to technology. What we want to do is we want to make AI work for us and not be beholden to it. And so you've got to remember that it's never going to be able to replace the sentience in you. It's never going to be able to replace your spirit. It's never going to be able to replace your being inside. But it can help you to identify patterns. It can help you to research information. So think about that with your meditation. Think about that in terms of your technology. We can use it to our benefit, but we can't allow it to use us.
So when you say we can't allow it to use us, the way that I imagine that is the idea of using AI and technology in a way, and to a certain degree, where we're almost relying on it to give us the answers
Yeah,
as opposed to us asking the right questions. I'm not sure how much sense that makes, but it's
it
almost
makes
like,
sense. Mm.
yeah, so there's something I'm thinking about, but I'm going to let the AI drive the conversation as opposed to me
Mm.
knowing where I want to go. And that goes back to what you were speaking about, a couple different things, right? The
Mm.
difference between the mind and the brain, and
Mind, yeah.
also awareness.
Awareness, yeah. We can exemplify it like this. Let's think about AI. So, everybody's gone mad about AI at the moment, right? And is AI going to replace us? Is AI going to replace jobs? Yes, it will, ladies and gentlemen. It is, but it's going to give more jobs. People who understand AI and are able to teach it and input it and utilize it for research. There will be a need for that. Well, this is the same kind of thing. You need to think about it. Most people are jumping out. Let's use AI and write an article. Let's use AI and develop this. It doesn't have your energy. It doesn't have your spirit. It hasn't got part of you. What you should be, like I said to you, is like your meditation. What you put into it, right? You want to be guided. You want to just be guided by it. Okay, so I'm going to use this for research. I have a big article I need to do. So let's think about the commonalities in the article. Give me a few pointers and maybe how we can set this out. And then you have to take that information and you have to allow your spirit to craft it because that has your energy. And it's the same in anything that we do in spirituality. It has to come from within, it has to come from you, lest it doesn't exist in the spirit. It just exists in the ether. It has no energy, it has no power over you. You can't allow it to have the power over you, but you can utilize it. Meditation, you can't allow meditation to have the power over you, but you can utilize it.
I'm so much in agreement with what you said. I really am. But here's kind of my issue with what you said,
Go for it.
and it's not a contradiction.
No,
It's not a counterpoint.
you
But
know
what?
me, I love to be challenged. So go,
No,
let's do it.
no. It's more of an observation. I'll
Yeah,
say,
go for it.
when you say things like you can't let the AI drive you or have the power over you, what about the people who are already there? They will say, I'm not spiritual and I'm all about the
Mm.
machines. I mean, you know how it is. There's some things where you don't realize, and I don't want to. I don't want
No, I
to.
get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to say like an addiction to AI,
Mm.
but in a sense, it's I'm not spiritual. I'm gonna milk AI for all it's worth, and they've already gone past the point that you're talking about.
So there, okay. So there'll come a time, and you know what? I'm kind of gonna challenge as well, and I'll say to you that, and I'll posit that AI will become addictive just as we have now. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that there's something I could be wrong. That's been added into DSM-5 about social media addiction or addiction at that level. I'm not sure if it's so. I'm sure it's in there, and I see I see the potential of AI becoming a psychological imbalance, and it has all the unique patterns to it that will happen. There's going to come a time that person who says, "I'm not spiritual, I'm just going to milk it." They can't keep doing that forevermore because the spirit, the soul, is going to yearn for expression. Something will come out of their, it will be imbalanced within them, whether it takes a year, whether it takes 10 days, whether it takes 2 years or whatever. There is going to be an imbalance that will happen, and that is down to their own free will, and how they're becoming beholden to it. They can't operate without it. Look at the people that can't operate without social media. They get so distant from their own spirit that even they're so focused on the social media Their spirit is yearning. It's yearning for expression. They're the spirit, the soul is calling for their spirit to be ignited so that they can become more spiritual. So it doesn't matter. It does not matter even if a skeptic says, I don't believe in the spirit world, or I don't believe in the paranormal or spirituality. There will come a time where they will begin to question because of their experiences or their deep yearning through their soul's need to express. So whether a person sits there and says, you know what, I'm not spiritual, I'm just going to milk it and I'm going to get whatever I can get out of it, go for it, dude, because there's going to come a time where your imbalance will show and you will cause your own suffering and you will create your own prison and you will yearn for expression. And it won't be your material self that will yearn, it will be your spiritual self that will yearn. And then that will create imbalance, physical, mental, biological imbalances in the material world.
As you say that, I mean, it really hits home because really that happens to so many people all the
Mm,
time, and they don't recognize what they are experiencing.
no.
And so, for example, when we talk about an addiction to social media, it's not the addiction to the scrolling. It's not the thumb movements, right? It's
Doom
it's
scrolling.
right. That's not what it is. It's when they see things and they can relate to certain things, and the way that they relate, that's spiritual. And what I mean
Mm,
is when you see, for example, somehow you get into Instagram reels and it's showing you videos of children or puppies or something.
mm,
And if you feel that kind of tugging at you in a very positive, warm, loving way,
mm.
that's spiritual. But at the same time, you may see that and say, why am I looking at this crap? And the truth is, there's so many different kinds of people
Yeah,
who are
absolutely.
labeled in certain ways in America, not even around the world, right? The diversity is infinite, but just in the US, there's so many groups of people who look
Mm,
at other people and say, you disgust me, or what's wrong with you? And they don't recognize that, whether it's through social media or someone they see in public, they don't recognize that is an expression of their
yeah,
spirit.
yeah.
But because of the way that they're connected to social media, and this goes back to what you were saying a few minutes
Mm,
ago, it's like I'm connecting with what you were just saying, but that's where it's the information that you're given,
mm,
that you're consuming, that is essentially directing your spirit instead of the other way around. You're not choosing what you consume, you're consuming whatever is provided to you and then allowing that to get you to open a pathway
mm.
for hate and disgust.
Yeah,
But it's not Instagram that has the hate, it's your spirit.
it's your spirit. Yeah, and it's you have it's not understanding your free will and your freedom of choice, because you have a choice to scroll or not to scroll. You have a choice to be on social media. There's a danger also in being addicted to feeling good or addicted to
Yes.
watching badness. We can become addicted to spirituality. We can become addicted. We need a balance to be able to grow. Here's the thing: if everything was perfect, if we're looking at a lake and there was just perfect stillness and nothing, then there's no duality. Then there's no growth. We need the negative to be able to teach us to grow, to expect to feed the soul's expression and need for to learn things or to move through it. We don't grow that way. But the other thing is that you could be doom scrolling, and also there's another aspect that nobody thinks about, and I think about it at times. If I'm scrolling and things, I'm thinking, wait a minute. Yes, I could be watching this, and that is a good feel good thing. I just saw someone giving a homeless person some food, or I see something funny. It makes me jovial, but is my soul needing something more expression? Am I
Yeah.
wasting time scrolling here when I could be out and helping someone homeless, or I could be doing something more expression? more expressional within my being rather than just soaking that up. So there has to be an awareness here where yes, you feel good, or you're watching something that's ridiculous. I think of this even if I scroll and I pick up the news. I'm like, okay, am I wasting time soaking this in, whether it's good, whether it's negative? Why don't, if I put it down and don't do it, will my own intuition give me signs that you could be expressing yourself in a better way? Even if it's going out into the garden and tending the plants, that's a spiritual thing. So we've got to become aware of all avenues of it. And at the moment we don't. We get hooked on to the good things, or we get hooked on to the bad things, and we think, well, it's not Instagram that's negative. But remember, and I'm going to kind of go against that a little bit, because there is an intent in Instagram. And there's a negative and positive intent. And so, yes, it's just a tool. But what is the intention behind that tool? And what is the hidden agenda behind that tool? It's not just to keep somebody engaged because necessarily they want to make as much money as possible. And so they don't care in how that makes a person feel good or negative. I watched something the other day, and I was watching. It was a marketing guru who was talking about the changes that were happening in the future, and he says, you know what? I just they don't care about anything other than engagement. So I will do things on social media to get controversy, to be negative, in order that I get that engagement. So what is the intent? It's not just about being connected to that goodness or connected to that negativity. We also have to be able to have a power of discernment and discerning the intention. And that's a spiritual thing that we need that we need. And you don't learn that in a book. You learn that through developing your soul and your spirit, your soul inside.
I I agree with you so much, but what you were saying, especially finishing up talking about development, just my mind wandered to the idea of, looking at technology and AI and so on,
Mm,
to your spirituality in our current culture through the developmental phases. And what I mean by that is first of all, there's this, research that we've seen,
mm.
past research, because it's now deemed unethical to do things like, isolate a baby for a year or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's been shown that through complete isolation damage you, it
Mm,
harms you. And I think about the way that, the brain functions and the way that we need connection with other people.
yeah.
And then I think about how in this land of money and productivity,
Mm,
it's it's about people going back to work, moms going back to work as soon as possible, and the way that we can have 25% of the world's inmates in one country. And so, even early on, early in your development, up through school, where you can have one teacher with 30 something kids, you kind of grow up in a life with disconnection where
yeah.
the iPad is the babysitter.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And actually, you see it. I often see this. When I go out and I sit in a coffee shop or anything else. Like I went to a coffee shop today with my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law's here from Wales, and I love her to bits. And I took her to a coffee shop. We're having a coffee, and I got chatting. And at the end of it, I got chatting to this woman. It's fascinating talking to this woman, and we connected and we learned about each other. And my mother-in-law doesn't talking to people. She's not really that open to different crowds or anything like that, or engaging with people. But it was really interesting because afterwards she says, you know what, I really enjoyed that hour or so that we spent, and I loved talking to that woman. It was so interesting. She felt a level of connection that was beyond. The phone was never looked at once. And yet I can look over in the corner and see other people in the coffee shop, and they're like kiss. And they're sitting with their loved one or anything, and they're just, and they're sitting with their loved one or anything, and they're just, and they're sitting with their loved one or anything, and they're just, and they're sitting with their loved one or anything, and they're just, and they're sitting with their loved one or anything, and they're just, and they're sitting with their loved one or anything, and they're just, and they're sitting with their loved one or anything, and they're just, and they're sitting with their loved one or anything, and they're just, and they're sitting with their loved one or anything, and they're just, and they're sitting with their loved one or anything, and they're just, and they're sitting with their loved one or anything, and they're just, and they're sitting with their loved one or anything, and they're just, and they're sitting with their loved one or anything, and they're just, and they're sitting with their loved one or anything, and they're just, and they're sitting with their loved one or anything, and they're just, and they're sitting with their loved one or anything, and they totally numb and not engaging. So there's a certainly a danger that we create more disconnection through not only just social media, but probably even in AI and everything else. And sometimes, as you say, your spirit is yearning. We're yearning for connection.
Yeah, it really is. And when you talk about people sitting there with their loved ones, but they're scrolling and they're not engaging, what I think about is the habits or
Mm,
the lifestyle where when you see someone sitting at a restaurant or at home at a dinner table, wherever it is, and they're on their phone, a couple of things I think of.
mm,
First of all, it's you're already disconnected. You're not on
totally.
your way. You're already
Mm,
there. And another thing I think of is you're so out of touch with your own mind
absolutely.
that when there is not something giving you, I don't know, entertainment, giving you stimulus,
Yeah.
you go on your phone to find it because you're unable to I don't know, to sit with your own thoughts. And so what I want to do with that concept, and I want you
Yes.
to kind of go with this, is
Mm,
when someone needs to be provided something to think about, and when someone is already disconnected, that being on their phone is it's just how it is. How does that relate to a disconnected spirit within the person?
that's so interesting because I think people are frightened to be with themselves,
Yes.
and but the reality is that to be with yourself is actually to be. It is to be at one with nature. It's to how can you get an intuitive feeling, or how could you get the answers that maybe you're sitting and thinking, "Oh, I want to do this. I wonder if I could do this for my you guys out there that are listening that have your own business, you're entrepreneurs. You're forever on the screen and you're forever trying to learn the next thing. And you're forever scrolling to get the in, but you still get stuck. You don't know where to go. You don't know what the right step is. Everybody else is telling you what to do, and that might not necessarily work for you. But then you sit and you're quiet and you're silent and you're just enjoying you in the moment. And all of a sudden, this intuitive awareness happens inside of you, and you go, aha, that's what I can do. You don't get that unless you go within and you find the silence in yourself. And so if you have to get to a point of awareness to realize you're disconnected, and I hope everybody who's listening to this on Cope Life Nation today will take some time and where am I disconnected in my life? Where am I disconnected in the moment? And where can I find reconnection in myself?
I love that. I love that the elevating of the self awareness
Mm,
of learning why you're disconnected, where and how you're disconnected.
yeah,
And what happens is, back to what you said earlier, spirituality is internal, it's within.
yeah,
And a lot of times we have these voids and we're looking externally. I'm
yeah.
disconnected from this person. We used to be friends a long time ago. We used to talk all the time. We don't anymore. I would like to talk to that person again. And so then the next thought of the disconnected person is, I wish they would call me, as if they have no power in the situation.
As if they couldn't take the time to take action, awareness and action, and actually pick up the phone and call them or make a connection through whatever means they can. You
So
can't wish something to happen without taking action. A wish is nothing.
see, when you say that, and of course we mentioned, so a wish is nothing, right? Reminds me
Mm,
of this quote that Robert Kiyosaki said a long time ago. And I'm not really a fan of his, but one thing he said was, you know what the problem with dreams is? Reality. And so when I think of something like I want to connect with someone more, I want to be connected like we were before, and I'm waiting for them to reach out to me, maybe because I'm afraid to reach out to them first. I'm afraid of rejection. I'm afraid of all of
yeah.
these other things because of a lack of, I want to say like a lack of self-respect, but at the same
Mm,
time, it's just kind of an overall lacking in my life. And so I want to take those ideas and concepts and put it to you like this to get your idea on these terms and
mm,
concepts. So if I were to say, I'm afraid to call this person because maybe they don't like me anymore. I don't know what I did to them. And then someone were to respond, that's the spirit of fear.
mhm.
What does that make you think of when you hear things like that?
Well, I would agree that there is a fear aspect into it, but there's also a self-confidence aspect into it as well. And there's also an element of denial. And there's so many emotions that are integral. See, one emotion can't work without the other because we're all interconnected and we're all part of the same animating force. And so you feel fear, you feel hate, you feel love, you feel, all of these emotions are connected. And so you can't just look at one thing and say, well, it's just the fear and you've got to overcome that fear. How do you overcome that fear? Well, maybe you just need to have a look within in you and say, okay, before we find out where that seed of fear is, what is it about me that is what is it, do I love myself enough? Do I question myself enough? Am I striving to be a better person in my mind, not just how I express things outside? And am I willing to go above and beyond and challenge myself so that I can grow? It reminds me of the old story about the lobster who sheds its shell. It retreats, it grows inside of itself, and it gets to the point where it can't breathe and it's got no more room for expansion. So what does it do? It retreats. It goes into the quiet, it sheds the shell, it grows a bigger one, and then it can grow all over again. If we can become more aware of the need for us to grow, for the need for us to shed our shells, then maybe we'll look at fear differently and look at fear as a powerful tool that can teach us what it is we need to know about ourselves.
I love that. I love that. For me, it's what do I need to learn about myself?
Yeah.
And
Mm,
and I think when you can apply that question to things like, why am I lonely? Why am I afraid? Why am I stuck? Why have I not achieved my dreams? Why doesn't this person love me anymore?
mhm.
And what we can do is we can put those questions out there in a rhetorical manner as a way of just expressing self-pity.
Mm,
Whereas what you said is, what do I need to learn about myself? So I feel so alone. Okay, that's a true statement. You feel alone. And then the next question should be, what do I need to learn about myself
mm.
in order for me to grow? So not just to go from lonely to having a companion, because it's not that simple. Because I can
It's
be
not easy.
lonely and be surrounded
No.
by people. So why is it that I feel lonely? And elevates that awareness of the connection again back to the mind and the brain,
Yes.
because the brain can process this information. There's nobody in this room with me.
Yeah.
Sometimes you feel lonely, sometimes you feel a life of abundance,
Yeah.
and that is the mind. And the mind is more connected to the spirit, whereas the body is more connected to your central nervous system, your vagus nerves, and your
Mm.
bone structure. And so the brain is processing information, but it's the spirit that drives the curiosity. It's the
Yeah.
spirit that drives the recognition that it's not about the number of people around, I feel lonely.
And it's true. You can feel, this is a true saying in that, Charleston, that you can be the loneliest man in the room while everybody's having a party.
Yes.
And I would say to someone is that you have to, exactly as you said, you have to ask yourself, why am I feeling lonely? And why do I want to keep myself in this pattern and this cycle of abuse? Because I have the power to open up and create a new circle. I have a power to step out of that pattern of abuse or that circle of abuse, and open a new one. But people don't, because they're comfortable in their loneliness, or they're comfortable in their pain, because they're frightened to look at who they are and how they may transform. They're comfortable in that way. And so I would say anybody who's lonely out there, anybody who's facing anxiety, anybody who's depressed, there always is going to be a seed that grew within that caused you to be that way. And so you need to go back into yourself. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling so lonely when I actually have the power to not be lonely? And if someone said, and I had this recently in one of my grief groups, where they said, "I'm so lonely, I can't do nothing about it," and I said, well, why not? I don't do nothing, I can't do nothing. Well, why not? No, you have the power. You can. You think you can't, but you can. And if you made that choice, now that you're aware of that, it's you that's making you lonely. It's you that's building the prison around you. And the reality is that prison door was always opened for you to walk out of it.
Yeah.
And then all you need to do, and that's what she did. She went to library, she decided to go and do a class that she was interested in, and there you go. She made the decision to not be lonely anymore, because she became aware that she was the one that was causing it.
Yeah, that's when you say these things, I have all these thoughts, like my brain is running wild. And we only have a few minutes left. We got about 3.5 minutes left. But when you say that, it makes me think about people's word usage, right? And
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to connect these things, right? Because
Mm.
someone can say, I can't do this. But maybe they have the power to do it, but they don't believe they can. And so then I want them to say, I want them to change their words to say, instead of going from I can't to I've chosen not to, but
Yeah.
I can choose to do it in the future, or I feel like I can't, where you now position yourself to change or manage your emotions about the event. And then what happens is the difference in words changes more
Changes.
than
Yeah.
just, yeah, it changes, like your frequency, your vibration, your energy gets
Absolutely.
tied to your spirit. And so
Yep.
I want to ask you this one question,
Mm.
and then from there you can take it wherever you want for a couple minutes, right? I wish we had
We
more
could go
time.
anywhere. Okay.
Um, but kind of the way that our own the way that we verbalize anything
Mm.
impacts our spirits.
Yes.
And why is that important?
I would say to people, okay, I would say to people, don't believe in anything. Because if you believe in anything, then you're believing in the perception and the attachments of other people. And so I would say to you is you have to come to knowing, because knowing is divine. And so knowing is knowing who you are. Man, know thyself, is in scriptures. Know yourself, who you are. That's what we're always trying to do, trying to get to know ourselves. We don't want to, I don't need to believe in me. I need to know me. If I know me, there is nothing that will hold me back from anything. If I believe in me, there is still room for error, and there's still room for misperception, and to be, cause new attachments. I want to come to the point of knowing, and in my knowing, then I can be part and interconnected with all that there is. And that means that I when I'm looking for a sense of belonging, I don't need to, because I belong nowhere, but I belong everywhere, because I know exactly who I am, and I know that I'm connected to all that there is.
I love that you said that because you remind me of a Brene Brown interview where well, she was talking about belonging and loneliness, and she was speaking to Maya Angelou, and Maya Angelou said, real freedom is when you don't belong anywhere. And that's what you
Yeah,
just said.
absolutely. That's true. And I get taught that many years ago when I was in the monastery. I get taught that by a monk, and in a different kind of way. And it's true. But we're always searching for something to belong to a gang, to belong to something because we feel. But we don't need to be there because we're everywhere. We're interconnected. I mean, in Buddhism, they talk about interconnectedness and the fact that, that we're connected to everything and that we're part of that big grand scheme. And the way that I see it is that the same animating force that animates me, that animates you, that animates my bonsai tree, that animates the grass, that there is no separation from it. There is no difference to it. The only difference in it is maybe the amount.
Yes. All right. Well, oh man, that's all the time we have. Everything you said, I had about 10 or 15 thoughts to go with it.
We'll need to
And
do another one at some
yes, we do.
point.
Yes, we do. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here. Any last words for our audience before we get out of here?
I would say to people, look, if you think you can't have time to be spiritual, then you can't have time to do anything. Because in order for you to do something, for you to exist, you actually have to be spiritual. Even if you can't perceive it now, is already part of you. Whether you take 5 minutes to be alone outside, whether you just think and contemplate in the shower, or whether you just enjoy some food with your family, every moment is a spiritual moment, and it's not one you have to journey to. It's just one you have to become aware of.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Jock. We have to close the show. Everyone that watched this live or the replay, I appreciate you. And let me know, provide me the comments what you thought, and we'll bring Jock back at another time. And with that, I will say thank you, Jock, for being here. I'm grateful for you, and good night.
My pleasure.